Aroa is a beautiful and cheerful girl with a mischievous smile. She loves teasing her upperclassman, Akiteru, finding every chance to get under his skin. To him, it looks like she's just being playful, but deep down, her teasing hides something more complicated. She's secretly in love with him, even if she refuses to admit it. Akiteru, on the other hand, sees her as nothing but a nuisance. Serious and easily annoyed, he believes Aroa only exists to ruin his peace. The episode starts with Akiteru returning to his dorm, hoping for a bit of peace. But as soon as he reached the hallway, a loud noise came from his room. Someone was singing, and not quietly. The sound was so strong it echoed through the walls. Akiteru froze for a moment, trying to calm his irritation, but the voice only grew louder. He sighed deeply and clenched his jaw. Inside, sprawled comfortably on his bed, was none other than Iroha, singing her heart out without a care in the world. Her carefree attitude only fueled his frustration. Finally, Akiteru snapped. He stormed into his room and yanked the power cord from the outlet, cutting off the music instantly. But Iroha, completely unfazed, simply turned around and greeted him cheerfully, as if he were the one intruding. She even scolded him for being rude, saying he shouldn't barge into someone's room without knocking. That smug tone made him even angrier because this was his own room. She was the trespasser. Trying to stay calm, Akiteru told her to keep the volume down before she disturbed the other residents. He even pointed at her headphones as a hint. But instead of listening, Iroha smirked and teased him, suggesting he just wanted an excuse to touch her. Akiteru shut her down coldly, saying he had no interest in her childish antics. Still, she didn't stop. She joked that he'd been trying to peek while she was changing and even threatened to call the police. In truth, Akiteru was the one who should have been calling them. She had broken into his room, after all. For a moment, he actually considered it, but deep down, he knew no one would believe him over her. Iroha was good at playing the victim. She clearly enjoyed asserting her control over him. At one point, she even flopped down on his bed, emphasizing her chest just to mess with him. Embarrassed, Akiteru looked away, but she had hidden his dorm key between her chest, the same key he had once given her for emergencies. Apparently, emergency meant showing up whenever she pleased. Iroha kept pushing his buttons, teasing that once she left, he'd end up missing her and fantasizing about her. That was the final straw. Akiteru grabbed his spray bottle from his desk and sprayed water right in her face. She gasped in shock, and another round of bickering began. Eventually, Iroha tried to justify herself, saying she was practically like his little sister since she was his friend's sibling. But Akiteru rejected that completely. To him, she was nothing but a stranger who wouldn't leave him alone. Still, she continued to tease, smiling every time he got flustered. Just then his phone rang. It was his uncle, Makoto. Akiteru glared at Iroha, warning her not to make a sound because this call was important. She reluctantly nodded, but there was mischief in her eyes. Makoto was the president of HP Do, one of the country's biggest entertainment companies. He had heard about Akiteru's recent bold move, applying to the company without taking the proper entrance exam. Makoto wasn't too happy about it, but since Akiteru was family, he said he'd consider helping him under certain conditions. Then Makoto's tone changed. He suddenly asked if Akiteru had a girlfriend. The question caught both Akiteru and Iroha off guard. Iroha's eyes immediately sparkled. Clearly, she was plotting something. Akiteru noticed and gave her a sharp look, warning her to stay quiet. But of course, she didn't listen. Instead, she started making strange sounds beside him, loud enough for his uncle to hear through the phone. Panicking, Akiteru quickly lied, saying it was just his new cat. Unfortunately, when Makoto asked about the cat's name and breed, Akiteru stumbled over his answers. Iroha only made things worse, mewing and giggling under her breath. Desperate, Akiteru pretended the cat was attacking him to make the situation sound real. But Makoto wasn't fooled. He began to suspect Akiteru had a girlfriend. Flustered, Akiteru denied it immediately. Strangely, that seemed to satisfy Makoto. He ended the call on a positive note, saying they would discuss his application in more detail soon. After the call, Iroha rolled around on Akiteru's bed, pretending to be thirsty. Tired of her games, he simply told her to get her own drink. She cheerfully skipped away, leaving him alone in his frustration. The next day, during a free period, Akiteru sat by the window, quietly writing in his notebook. His thoughts drifted to life, death, and his promise to use every moment to build a better future. Soon, his best friend Ozuma dropped into the seat beside him, exhausted. Akiteru had taken notes for him earlier, and Ozuma thanked him with a grateful smile. To return the favor, Ozuma invited him for dinner after class. Akiteru admired his friend deeply. Ozuma always seemed calm, dependable, and kind. But Ozuma turned the compliment back at him, saying Akiteru had a good heart and cared about others more than he realized. The conversation shifted when Ozuma mentioned his sister. He assumed she had visited Akiteru again, and when Akiteru admitted it, Ozuma laughed and teased that maybe she had a crush on him. Akiteru disagreed immediately. In his mind, Iroha only liked to mess around. Azuma suggested that maybe teasing was her way of showing affection, but Akitoru couldn't believe that. He thought if she truly liked him, she wouldn't torment him so much. Their talk ended when the fiery homeroom teacher entered, snapping at everyone to sit down. Class began and the rest of the day passed quickly. After class, one of Akitoru's classmates rushed over saying a cute first-year girl was waiting for him at the door. Sure enough, Iroha stood there smiling sweetly. Akitoru frowned immediately and told her to drop the act, but she kept pretending to be shy and innocent in front of everyone. When she asked to walk home together, Akitoru refused. But she didn't stop there. She told everyone they were a couple. The entire class gasped, leaving Akitoru frozen in shock. Iroha even pretended to cry, claiming he was trying to hide their relationship. At that exact moment, Ozuma walked in looking confused. Iroha quickly told him that she and Akitoru were going home together alone, making things even worse. Panicked, Akitoru grabbed her hand and dragged her outside to talk. Once they were alone, he demanded an explanation. Iroha grinned and said she did it for his sake. She had overheard his phone call with Makoto and figured pretending to be his girlfriend would make him look good. She smugly added that since she was out of his league, he should consider it a privilege. But Akitoru wasn't amused. He scolded her for interfering with his future and told her to stop playing games. Before he could leave, Iroha suddenly hugged him from behind. Her voice softened. She told him the future didn't matter, what mattered was the present, and that she cared about him deeply. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered that she wanted them to stay close forever. For a moment, Akitoru's heart softened. He thought she was finally being sincere. But then, Iroha burst into laughter, teasing him for actually falling for her act. Akitoru's face turned red as she continued to giggle, calling him cute for blushing. That was the last straw. Furious, Akitoru shouted that he'd never believe anything she said again and chased her down the hallway. But she escaped before he could catch her. Later that day, Akitoru met with his uncle Makoto at a cafe to discuss his HP application. Makoto mentioned someone else would be joining them but wanted to speak privately first. He praised Akitoru's earlier success, a small game he produced with his team, the Fifth Floor Alliance. Akitoru explained that there were 5 of them. Ozuma as the programmer, himself as producer and director, and 3 others who worked hard alongside them. Makoto admitted he was impressed, even he couldn't have achieved that much as a student. Before continuing, Makoto encouraged Akitoru to order something. As the waitress came by, Makoto casually flirted with her, even asking her out for dinner right in front of his nephew. Akitoru was speechless, embarrassed by his uncle's shamelessness. Needing a moment to breathe, Akitoru excused himself to the bathroom, but didn't notice the sign on the door that said the lock was broken. When he pushed the door open, he accidentally walked in on a girl, Mashiro, sitting on the toilet. Horrified, he froze, and the girl immediately punched him in the stomach out of pure embarrassment. Moments later, back at the table, Makoto introduced the same girl, Mashiro, as the other guest. To Akitoru's shock, she was his cousin, Makoto's daughter, and his childhood playmate. He hadn't recognized her at all. Then Makoto revealed his real plan. He wanted Akitoru to act as Mashiro's fake boyfriend. In exchange, he'd approve Akitoru's application to HPW. Both cousins were stunned. Mashiro immediately called the idea ridiculous, but Makoto remained firm. He explained that Mashiro would soon transfer from an all-girls school to a co-ed one, and he wanted someone trustworthy to watch over her. Still, Mashiro refused. When Akitoru asked why she needed to transfer, she refused to answer, and Makoto avoided explaining too much. The only thing he revealed was that Mashiro had been skipping school a lot. She was a truant student. Hearing that, Akitoru didn't push any further. He understood there was reason enough for concern. In the end, Akitoru accepted the deal, knowing it could help his entire team get into HPW. Mashiro, though reluctant, finally agreed too, on one strict condition. Their relationship would stay completely fake. Akitoru offered his hand to seal the agreement, but Mashiro refused to shake it, still holding a grudge over the bathroom incident. Watching the two of them bicker, Makoto smiled, confident they'd get along someday, though both disagreed immediately. Before leaving, Makoto reminded Akitoru that since this was only an act, he wasn't allowed to fall in love with Mashiro for real. Akitoru brushed it off, certain that wouldn't be a problem. After all, she clearly disliked him anyway. The next day began quietly as Akitoru met Iroha at the school. The moment she saw him, she sensed something was wrong. His usual liveliness was gone, replaced by a dull and distant look. Curious and worried, Iroha tried to find out what was bothering him. She guessed it might have something to do with the meeting he had the day before, but Akitoru avoided the subject. Even as he tried to brush her off, Iroha kept following him, hoping he might slip and reveal something. That morning, class started as usual, but things quickly took an unexpected turn. The new transfer student, Mashiro, was asked to introduce herself to everyone. Nervous and flustered, she accidentally blurted out something shocking, as she was dating Akiteru. The classroom instantly filled with whispers. Everyone was stunned, wondering why someone like her would waste her looks on a quiet, average guy like him. Suzuki, one of the more talkative boys, immediately asked how they met. Still nervous, Mashiro accidentally said they met in the bathroom, a comment that made Akiteru freeze inside. You'd already imagine how bad that sounded. When Mashiro sat beside him afterward, he tried to act friendly to keep up appearances, but she immediately turned cold, reminding him that she hadn't forgiven him yet. Akiteru calmly pointed out that if their story was going to be believable, they needed to at least act close in front of others. Mashiro disagreed, insisting that as long as their stories matched, there was no need to pretend to be affectionate. Before he could say anything else, Ozuma tapped his shoulder and asked why he'd never mentioned having a girlfriend. Akiteru apologized and gave a vague answer, hinting that things weren't exactly as they seemed. By lunchtime, Akiteru filled Ozuma in on the situation, how his relationship with Mashiro was completely fake. Ozuma laughed and said it all sounded like a romantic comedy plot. Akiteru rolled his eyes and said Ozuma would make a better protagonist anyway, given his charisma and his little sister. Ozuma just smirked and said, "That's because my sister already loves you." Akiteru quickly denied it, but Ozuma only chuckled and left to get lunch. Moments later, Suzuki approached Akiteru with a serious look. He asked how Akiteru managed to get a girlfriend when everyone thought he was already dating Iroha. Feeling Yoshiro's cold glare from the side, Akiteru quickly clarified that Iroha was Ozuma's little sister. Then, to steer the topic away, he mentioned Suzuki's crush on their teacher, who was rumored to like muscular men. That instantly fired Suzuki up, and he stormed out of the room, determined to work out. Akiteru let out a sigh as he felt Mashiro's icy stare again. When he asked if she had a problem, she crossed her arms and demanded he bring her rice balls filled with seafood, declaring that since they were dating, it was his duty. She even threatened to call off their fake relationship if he refused. Reluctantly, Akiteru did as told and returned with 2 rice balls and a drink for her, while he quietly ate a piece of bread. As he watched her eat, he briefly wondered if she might have been jealous about his earlier conversation, but quickly dismissed the idea. After all, Mashiro clearly couldn't stand him. Classes resumed, and their homeroom teacher, Sumair, stepped to the front. She asked if everyone had done their homework. When one boy admitted he forgot, Sumair's expression darkened. She launched into a stern lecture about responsibility and discipline, saying those without it were nothing but scum. The boy tried to defend himself, but she quickly shut him down, eventually letting it slide only after making him promise to do better. As Akiteru listened, he glanced at Mashiro, noticing how seriously she was watching Sumair. He thought that maybe this strict teacher wasn't the best person to guide a nervous transfer student. When class ended, Sumair stopped Akiteru at the door and told him to meet her in the counseling room to discuss an assignment. Akiteru simply nodded. Once she left, a few boys surrounded him, amazed at how calm he was. Everyone knew Sumair was terrifying, but Akiteru only shrugged and said, "She's not going to kill me," before heading off. When he arrived at the counseling room, he was told to come in. What greeted him looked more like a torture chamber than an office. He sat down at the center, and suddenly, Sumair's entire attitude flipped. She bowed deeply, trembling as she begged for forgiveness. At that moment, Akiteru's own tone changed, calm and confident, almost commanding. He showed her the notifications on his phone, revealing she'd been slacking off and spending time online instead of working. Her strict school persona as Shibuku Murasaki might have fooled her students, but Akiteru knew her real identity, Sumair, the unreliable illustrator of his creative team, the Fifth Avenue Alliance. Sumair stammered excuses about lesson plans and burnout. Akiteru sighed and pointed out how harshly she'd lectured that student earlier. She weakly defended herself, saying that her strict queen act was just for her students. Deciding to change the topic, Akiteru asked about her current progress on their project. Nervously, she handed him her tablet, showing a completely blank page. Akiteru's patience broke. He threatened to throw her into one of the fake torture machines. Sumair desperately claimed she had artist's block. Akiteru let go of her hair and sighed, telling her she should come to him instead of wasting time. She said that would ruin her cool image. Annoyed, he pressed her shoulder and muttered that she was hopeless. He remembered the first time they met at a manga convention when he was searching for illustrators. He hadn't found anyone until he discovered a beautiful comic about forbidden love. To his shock, the artist was his own teacher, Sumair. Since then, he had kept her secret identity to make sure she met her deadlines. Sumair wished they'd met differently, but Akiteru said it was her fault for hiding such a secret and ordered her to start drawing. She complained she still couldn't because of her block. Akiteru told her to nap or eat something. When she panicked and blurted that she didn't like boys over 15, he scolded her and finally gave her a half-day extension, which cheered her up. Before he left, she asked about his relationship with Mashiro. Akiteru admitted it was fake, something arranged for business reasons to get his uncle's support. Sumire then told him about Mashiro's past. At her old school, she was bullied after a personal secret was revealed. Since then, she had struggled to trust others. Sumire asked Akitaru to make her school life peaceful. Though he brushed it off, she smiled, saying she and Ozuma were thankful for him. He coldly replied that compliments wouldn't get her another extension and left. Back in class, Akitaru asked Mashiro if she wanted to walk home together. She coldly refused. Their classmates began whispering, some teasing that they looked like a couple. Blushing, Mashiro ran out of the room. Akitaru sighed, wondering why she was so distant. Ozuma told him Mashiro wasn't a bad person, just difficult to approach. Later, in the shoe locker area, Akitaru suddenly felt arms wrapped tightly around him from behind. Without even turning, he knew that voice. It was Aroha. She refused to let go, teasing that she was just being kind. But when she pressed closer, Akitaru froze, realizing something felt off. Aroha casually admitted she wasn't wearing anything inside because her uniform had gotten too tight after she grew a little. Akitaru was stunned. He didn't know whether to believe her, but if he pushed her off and she wasn't lying, the situation could turn disastrous. Deciding to minimize the risk, he hoisted her onto his back, carrying her like a piggyback ride. Aroha panicked and begged him to stop running. Akitaru only taunted her, telling her to admit she was lying. Flustered, she finally surrendered, and he let her down after making her apologize for teasing him. Only then did he realize she had actually been telling the truth about her clothes. As they walked, Akitaru asked how to get along with the difficult girl. Aroha thought he was confessing a crush, but when he said it was about Mashiro, she relaxed and promised to help. The next day, Akitaru came to school wearing a dog collar, offering to carry Mashiro's bag and even serve her lunch, all Aroha's idea. Instead of warming up to him, Mashiro grew more annoyed. She dragged him to the stairwell and demanded an explanation. Akitaru admitted that it was Aroha's idea. He'd known it was ridiculous, but tried anyway. That only irritated Mashiro more. She wondered aloud if he really disliked her that much. Before he could answer, Aroha appeared, teasing them for acting like a couple. When Mashiro asked who she was, Aroha proudly introduced herself as the mastermind behind the scheme. Watching their playful banter, Mashiro couldn't help but notice how close they seemed. Annoyed, she declared she was leaving and told them both to stop bothering her. Later that day, when Akitaru and Aroha arrived home, they were shocked to find Mashiro at their apartment complex. She immediately accused them of following her, but they quickly explained they all just happened to live in the same building. Aroha cheerfully added that she and Akitaru were siblings in spirit since her brother was his best friend. Mashiro misunderstood, thinking they all lived together. Akitaru quickly clarified that they simply lived on the same floor, Sumire next to Ozuma, and Aroha in her own unit. But the mention of Sumire set Mashiro off. She shouted that she hated how close they all lived and slammed her door shut. Standing outside her room, Akitaru sighed, then smiled faintly. Despite her attitude, he called out confidently that he would meddle in her life, whether she liked it or not. The next day, Akitaru called a meeting in his room with his usual fifth-floor crew. Everyone gathered, half curious and half worried, because he looked unusually excited. Then he announced his new idea. He wanted to throw a welcome party for Mashiro, the quiet new girl who had just moved into their apartment building. He had already set the date. Friday, 8 p.m. sharp. Aroha immediately voiced everyone's concern, wondering if Mashiro would even show up. But Akitaru only grinned, saying that if she refused, he would keep bothering her until she agreed. Before anyone could argue, Akitaru added that there was something else to celebrate first. Since they had just finished a major project, the group decided to reward themselves with a small after-work party. The mood quickly turned cheerful as they began eating and drinking together. Sumire, their artist, drank too much and started laughing at everything. Akitaru scolded her for celebrating when she was always the one submitting work late. The others laughed, and even Sumire admitted through her giggles that he was right. As the night went on, Akitaru noticed that Aroha was unusually quiet and polite. That wasn't like her. When he asked why, she explained that she felt out of place since she wasn't officially part of the team. Akitaru gave her a puzzled look. He didn't mind polite Aroha, but it felt strange. She was usually the one who brought noise and energy to the room. Meanwhile, Ozuma, their tech genius, complimented Akitaru's roast beef. Akitaru replied that Ozuma's setup was the real reason they had met their deadline. But Ozuma insisted that Akitaru deserved credit for giving him a place to use his skills. Aroha smiled softly at the exchange. It was one of those rare, sincere moments that warmed her heart. Then Ozuma looked around, realizing someone was missing. Akitaru explained that Namako, their scenario writer, had a personal deadline. He told them he had first contacted Namako through a fan letter and had never expected a reply. To his surprise, the mysterious writer not only responded but also joined their team. They still hadn't met in person, but from their chats, Namako seemed professional and kind. Akitoru jokingly added that Namako was nothing like another adult he knew, glancing at Sumair. She protested drunkenly, and everyone laughed. Akitoru then clapped his hands, declaring that it was time to move on to their real mission, Mashiro's welcome party. 6 days before the party, Akitoru launched his first attempt to invite Mashiro. He rang her bell over and over until she opened the door, only to slam it shut in his face. It was his first failure. The next day, even though the doorbell was broken, he didn't stop. He filled her mailbox with handwritten invitations until it overflowed. That was failure number 2. 4 days before the party, he passed her notes during class. Mashiro responded by asking if this counted as bullying. He denied it, saying he only wanted to invite her. By Wednesday, Akitoru was desperate. He caught her near the elevator, but she called him a stalker. The next day, she scolded him for doing it in public. Still, Akitoru didn't give up. Persistence, after all, was his specialty. That afternoon, he went shopping for party supplies with Irova. While browsing, she stopped at a stall offering free cheese sausages. Her eyes sparkled as she grabbed one and told him to try it. Embarrassed, he refused. The sales lady assumed they were a couple and encouraged him to take one for his girlfriend. Iroha played along with the misunderstanding, teasing him. When he still refused, the sales lady insisted, and Akitoru finally reached for one, only for Iroha to pull it away and jokingly tell him to beg for it. Realizing she was teasing, Akitoru leaned in and took a bite instead, asking if she was satisfied now. She laughed, and the sales lady smiled, clearly convinced they were dating. As they continued shopping, Akitoru suddenly asked how Iroha could so easily say she loved people. She simply said it was because she meant it. Her honest answer made him think of Mashiro, who always kept her feelings hidden. Iroha asked whether Mashiro had agreed to come to the party, and Akitoru admitted he was running out of ideas. While reaching for a can of sauce on a high shelf, Iroha told him maybe he just wasn't trying hard enough. She reminded him that when he really wanted something, he always found a way, just like how he had convinced Ozuma and Sumair to join their team. Akitoru said that was just business, but Iroha shook her head and told him that his real strength wasn't leadership. It was understanding people and helping them chase their dreams. Her words caught him off guard. When she lost her balance reaching for the can, he caught her. She laughed and said that another reason everyone trusted him was because he never took their freedom for granted. Her words lingered in his mind. By the time they left the store, Akitoru had made up his mind. He would get Mashiro to the party no matter what. Meanwhile, in her apartment, Mashiro sat on her bed, quietly vowing not to let that annoying guy win. Friday finally arrived. During class, Akitoru didn't get the chance to talk to her, so he checked with Ozuma instead. Everything was ready: decorations, food, music. Akitoru told Ozuma that he owed him for pulling it all together in less than a week. After class, Akitoru just smirked, saying that everything was going according to plan. After school, he caught Mashiro near the shoe lockers. Before he could speak, she told him to stop inviting her. He raised his hands and said he was done inviting her. He only wanted to walk home with her since they lived in the same building. Mashiro didn't believe him. The moment he mentioned walking home, she ran off, and Akitoru sighed and chased after her, drawing confused looks from their classmates. Mashiro shouted at him to stop following, but Akitoru pretended not to understand, saying he was just running home too. They eventually ended up by the riverbank, both panting. Mashiro turned to him and said to stop worrying about her because she didn't fit in anywhere. Akitoru frowned and asked why she had even transferred schools if she didn't want to connect with anyone. He apologized for the bathroom incident before and told her that she didn't have to like him, but she should at least try talking to others. Mashiro tried to argue but slipped on the wet grass. Instinctively, Akitoru lunged forward to catch Mashiro, and both of them tumbled into the river. Soaking wet, he tried not to look at her wet clothes. Flustered, Mashiro tried to stand but stumbled again, and Akitoru steadied her by the shoulders. When they finally made it back to shore, Akitoru joked that they now looked like a matching pair of drowned rats. Mashiro laughed for the first time, saying it was probably the worst couple of ever. Akitoru grinned and teased that maybe it was some god's way of blessing their fake relationship. Mashiro muttered that if that was true, that God deserved to be fired. Akitoru told her that maybe if she kept praying, she might start feeling better about herself. Mashiro sighed, saying that no amount of praying would make people like her. Curious, Akitoru asked why she was so stubborn when he was clearly trying to get along with her. She admitted she was just scared of not fitting in with his circle of friends. Akitoru gently told her there was nothing wrong with that. He confessed that he wasn't exactly a standout himself, since people often overlooked him. Mashiro disagreed, pointing out that he was the leader of the Fifth Floor Alliance. Akitoru was surprised she knew. She explained that her father often talked about their hit games since it had made good money. Akitoru laughed and said that all the money just went back into development anyway. Mashiro then said that he could easily be one of the most popular guys in school if people knew about his work. Akitoru simply shrugged, saying he preferred to stay humble and didn't want success to make him arrogant. Mashiro smiled softly and told him that he was weird, but in a good way. Later, when they returned to the apartment building, Mashiro still refused to attend the party but admitted she was thankful for the invitation. Before she went into her room, Akitoru asked if she could start treating him normally next week. She agreed, but suddenly froze when she noticed her door was unlocked. Worried, Akitoru stepped in front of her and offered to go in first. Slowly, they walked inside. As they approached the main room, Akitoru muttered something under his breath, then gently pushed her forward and swung the door open. Confetti exploded everywhere. The room erupted with cheers as the Fifth Floor Alliance shouted their welcome to Mashiro. Completely stunned, Mashiro demanded to know why everyone was in her apartment. Akitoru sheepishly explained that the room was actually his and that they had set up a divider to make it look like hers. Mashiro glared at him, asking why they would go so far when she didn't even think of them as friends. Iroha then spoke up, saying that none of them were really friends either, except for Akitoru and Ozuma, though she personally wished they were a couple. Iroha continued, explaining that since they all lived on the same floor, they naturally started hanging out and creating games together. Mashiro looked surprised that she knew about the project, but Iroha quickly clarified that she wasn't actually part of the team. Akitoru smiled and said it was fine if Mashiro didn't see them as friends yet. For now, she could just think of them as her fake boyfriend's friends. He also mentioned their missing member, Namako, who couldn't attend but was an invaluable part of their team. Finally, Mashiro smiled and decided to stay. Later that night, Iroha burst into Akitoru's room and tried to hug him. He dodged, flustered, but she still praised him for pulling everything off. She thanked him for letting her be part of their group without revealing her secret identity as the voice actress for their game. That night, Akitoru finally decided it was time to talk to Ro about the past, how everything really began. He started his story with Ozuma. Back then, Akitoru had approached Ozuma out of curiosity, asking if he could see some of his experiments. Ozuma agreed, but only on one condition: that Akitoru would come by from time to check on them. Akitoru accepted without hesitation, and that was how their friendship quietly began. Not long after, Akitoru's parents moved away for work, and he ended up living in the same building as Ozuma. Life became strangely calm until one afternoon when Akitoru found Ozuma crouched down, staring at the floor tiles. When Akitoru asked what he was doing, Ozuma replied casually that he was just playing with numbers, using the tiles as his guide. Amused, Akitoru offered to let him hang out at his place, but Ozuma politely declined, saying his sister would be arriving soon. And right as he said that, the door opened and Iroha appeared, looking puzzled to see Ozuma waiting outside. Ozuma quickly explained that he had forgotten his keys and had been waiting for her. That's when Iroha noticed Akitoru standing there. Ozuma introduced him as his friend, neighbor, and classmate. Iroha blinked, surprised she hadn't expected her brother to have a friend. Akitoru introduced himself politely, and she did the same. That was the first time Akitoru met her. He remembered her as quiet and well-mannered, nothing like the outspoken girl she had become in the present. The next day, Akitoru brought up Iroha in class, wondering why Ozuma had never mentioned her. But before he could say much, a commotion started at the door. Otoi, a student believed to be suspended, had just walked into the classroom. Everyone turned to look. Otoi approached Akitoru and Ozuma, saying she needed to talk. They followed her somewhere more private, and there she surprised them with an apology and an offer of candy. Akitoru immediately pointed out that bringing candy to school was against the rules, which only made Otoi laugh. She teased them for being too serious, especially with her, someone who'd supposedly been skipping class. Confused, Akitoru asked about the suspension rumor, but Otoi said it wasn't true. She hadn't done anything bad enough for that. Then Ozuma suddenly asked if he could take one of the candies. As he plucked one from her hand, Akitoru reluctantly took one too. Otoi smiled and asked if Iroha, Ozuma's sister, was the girl she heard about. She said she wanted to know what kind of person she was. Ozuma hesitated, struggling to answer, which surprised Akitoru. Usually, Ozuma was straightforward about everything. When Otoi pressed again, Akitoru stepped in and explained that it wasn't an easy question because Ozuma probably didn't know her intent. Otoi thought about that and then admitted the truth. Asaji, one of her friends, had noticed that Iroha seemed to be getting interested in people like them, the so-called delinquents. She wanted to know if that was true. But judging by their reactions, Otoi figured she was wrong. Maybe Iroha was just a normal honor student after all. She admitted she hoped they knew her better, but they didn't. When Akitoru asked if they'd welcome Iroha if she ever joined their group, Otoi said yes, they wouldn't push her away. And with that, she left. Afterward, Akitoru asked Ozuma why he'd struggled to answer such a simple question. Ozuma admitted that he and his sister hardly talked. In fact, the day before had been the first time they'd spoken in 2 months. That stunned Akitoru. He couldn't imagine siblings living together but barely speaking. When he asked about their parents, Ozuma explained that they were rarely home and didn't really care. Akitoru couldn't hide his concern. Wanting to help somehow, he asked Ozuma if he could hang out at his place after school to play games. After school, Ozuma welcomed him in. The first thing Akitoru noticed was the empty living room. There was no television. Ozuma said he didn't need one since he spent most of his time in his room. When they entered, Akitoru was met with chaos. The floor was covered in scattered objects. He told Ozuma to clean up, but Ozuma just smiled and said he liked it that way. He knew where everything was. According to him, the clutter helped him think. As they set up the game console, Akitoru noticed Ozuma's custom-built PC and couldn't hide his admiration. Soon they were playing, and for a while, everything felt peaceful. Then Akitoru heard the sound of the front door. It was Iroha coming home. He made an excuse to go to the bathroom, but really just wanted to learn more about her. As he leaned near her room, he realized she was talking to someone. But before he could make out the words, the door swung open. Iroha stepped out and froze when she saw him. But Akitoru panicked and covered her mouth, pulling her back inside her room. He promised to let go if she didn't scream. She nodded, so he released her, and immediately got slapped. When she realized who it was, she glared and demanded an explanation. Akitoru tried to explain, but she had already decided he was a creep who broke into people's homes to eavesdrop. She even accused him of stalking her. Before he could respond, her phone began ringing. She snatched it from him, answered briefly, and hung up. Akitoru asked if she was trying to join a group of delinquents through Asaji, but she snapped at him not to make wild assumptions. He insisted he wasn't wrong, but she got irritated and told him to mind his own business. Akitoru argued that he was only trying to help because he was friends with Ozuma. Iroha shot back that being friends with her brother didn't make him her friend. Akitoru realized he hit a wall. Pushing any further might only make things worse for Ozuma. Still, he tried one last time, asking if she wanted to talk about her problems. She replied sarcastically that her problem was him, since her brother's friend wouldn't stop pestering her. Over the next few days, Akitoru couldn't let it go. He decided to investigate on his own. One hot afternoon, he left school early, pretending to be sick. He grabbed a bottle of water from a vending machine and kept walking until he heard singing, a girl's voice accompanied by a guitar. He recognized it instantly. It had to be Asaji. When he approached, Asaji looked up and teased him for skipping class. Akitoru fired back, saying she was one to talk since she was clearly skipping too. She blinked in surprise, then accused him of being a stalker. Akitoru quickly explained that he was just a friend of Ozuma's. Once she realized who he was, she smirked and remarked that he was the perverted guy Iroha had mentioned. Akitoru tried to introduce himself properly, but before he could finish, the heat overwhelmed him. His vision blurred and he collapsed right in front of her. He still remembered that day vividly. It had been one of the hottest of the year. Thankfully, Asaji called Otoi for help, and together they made sure he was okay. Later, when Iroha teased him about using Otoi's lap as a pillow, Akitoru admitted it was true, only because she offered. He added that they'd ended up talking a lot afterward, and honestly, it was worth all the trouble because their group became much closer after that, though none of them knew that Iroha was secretly the voice actor behind their game. Back in the past, Akitoru sat down with both Asaji and Iroha. He asked Asaji to stop living like a delinquent, suggesting it might do her good to live a normal student life. But Iroha immediately argued that he was asking too much. It would mean tearing Asaji away from her friends. Akitoru calmly said that wasn't what he wanted. He just wanted them to think about their choices. Still, Iroha lashed out, saying he didn't understand how people felt. Trying to reason with her, Akitoru pointed out that Asaji clearly wanted more than just hanging around friends. She had a real passion for music. He asked Iroha what she wanted, but she brushed it off, saying it didn't matter. Akitoru insisted that it did. Before he could push further, Asaji stepped in and told him to stop being so harsh. She revealed that Iroha wasn't actually trying to become a musician. She was just a fan. That surprised Iroha, who hadn't realized Asaji saw through her so easily. Asaji explained that from her perspective, it was obvious. Iroha didn't want to perform, she just loved the music itself. Iroha admitted it was true and confessed that she admired Asaji deeply. Akitoru misread that completely, wondering if they were dating, which made Iroha instantly deny it. She said she only admired Asaji's courage to do what she loved. Still, Akitoru couldn't understand why Iroha had to hang around with Asaji and Otoi to feel that way. Seeing her struggle, Asaji revealed the truth. Iroha wasn't allowed any freedom at home by her parents. She wasn't even allowed to have hobbies. Akitoru was shocked. He had noticed the lack of a TV in their apartment but hadn't realized things were that strict. Iroha quietly admitted that she had always obeyed her mother, but now she didn't even know what she truly wanted anymore. Hearing that, Akitoru felt something change inside him. He realized that both Ozuma and Iroha lacked the freedom to express themselves, while Asaji, though reckless, had that freedom in abundance. So Akitoru made a decision. He would help them all find a place where they could chase their dreams without being judged or labeled. Asaji called him a meddler and said they didn't need his help, but Akiteru stood firm. He said he would help anyway, not just for them, but for Ozuma too. When she asked how, he admitted he didn't know yet, but he promised to figure it out. After paying for his share of the meal, Akiteru left already deep in thought about his plan. He thought hard about it, about people with talent in programming, music, and creativity. Then inspiration struck. He went straight to Ozuma's place and said, "Let's make a game." Ozuma was surprised but intrigued. Akiteru explained the idea. He'd handle the story, characters, and art, while Ozuma took care of the programming. They started small, using free music just to test things, and day by day, the project grew. One night, as they worked side by side, Ozuma admitted that he really enjoyed creating something together. He'd always worked alone, but this felt different. It felt meaningful. Akiteru agreed, saying he already knew who their first testers should be, Ozuma's sister and Asaji. That marks the end of today's anime recap. If you enjoyed the video and want more of it, please support the channel by leaving a like and subscribe. Let's help us reach a current goal of 10K subscribers.